My name is Maya Collins, and for a long stretch, I measured life by open houses, closing dates, and the way the Front Range turns lavender at dusk. Denver was more than an address. It was a rhythm. I understood old brick streets in Park Hill, new glass downtown mountain air that smelled like sage after rain. 5 years ago, I poured myself into work after ending a relationship that had hollowed me out. The discipline paid off. By 34, I was the agent people called for historic homes with crooked charm and unobstructed light. I met Daniel Rhodes at a fundraising gala for the city's public arts program held at the History Colorado Center. He was taller than everyone around him, with gray at his temples that made his green eyes look brighter. His handshake was warm, his voice even, and he listened the way good lawyers do, carefully without rushing. "I've admired your listings along Montview," he said, almost sheepish. "I'm thinking about a larger place. My kids are growing fast." He told me about them without the defensiveness divorced parents often carry. Lila was 16, quiet until the conversation turned to cameras and editing software. Jonah was 14, a forward on his school soccer team who practiced volleys against any available wall. June 11 collected trivia and arguments with equal delight. She kept a notebook of quotes, and apparently a fierce competitive streak in debate club. He and his ex-wife Natalie had ended their marriage 3 years earlier. They alternated weeks with the children, and as he put it, tried to keep the trains running on time. We exchanged numbers. Our first date was a late brunch the following weekend at a cafe with high windows and good coffee. With Daniel, I felt the peculiar relief of not needing to perform. He wanted to hear my stories about eccentric sellers and the impossible buyers I somehow coaxed to the finish line. In return, I learned how he navigated securities litigation and why he read case law the way other people read thrillers. After nearly 3 months, he suggested I meet the kids. I spent an absurd amount of time negotiating clothes, settling on dark jeans, a soft sweater, and small earrings I wouldn't fidget with. We met at a burger place by the Riverwalk. Lila arrived first, camera strap across her chest, eyes taking everything in. She asked smart, unforced questions about staging and lens choices for interior shots. Jonah bounded in talking about a last-minute save he'd made at practice and wanted to know whether I'd ever broken a window with a ball. June hovered beside Daniel at first, then showed me a page in her notebook labeled "Arguments I Won," with a grin that made me laugh. The weeks that followed felt like the careful work of building a bridge plank by plank, checking weight before stepping forward. Lila shadowed me on a listing shoot and stitched together a short video that made an ordinary kitchen look cinematic. I learned the roar of Jonah's crowd and the specific way he tied his cleats for luck. June asked me to time her opening statements and quizzed me on logical fallacies during car rides. None of it was dramatic, which made it precious. A year into dating, Daniel proposed in a way that felt like him, considered sincere, no spectacle. We were in Telluride for a long weekend. The aspens were just waking up, and the mountain air tasted like cold water. He asked in a clearing near a trailhead, breath clouding between us. I said yes before the word fully formed. We planned a small ceremony in May at the Denver Botanic Gardens. Lila wore a slate blue dress and took candid photos after the official ones were done. Jonah carried the rings and for once stood absolutely still. June scattered petals with the solemnity of a judge calling a court to order. Friends toasted. We ate lemon cake under lanterns. For a honeymoon, we drove the coast from Carmel to Big Sur, staying in a cliffside inn where the ocean sounded like an uninterrupted thought. Back in Denver, we made one decision quickly. My 1930s brick house in Park Hill would become home base. It had 4 bedrooms, a sunroom that faced east, and a backyard deep enough for late summer dinners. Daniel sold his condo. We took each child shopping to choose colors and bedding. Lila leaned into moss and cream. Jonah chose a navy pinstripe duvet, like a stadium at night, and June assembled pastels into an optimistic rainbow. We organized mornings, experimented with dinners, divided chores. On the first Sunday after the move, Jonah looked around the dining room mid-pancake and said, mouth half full, "This place is huge." "Our place," I said, and meant it. The house felt wider with their noise in it, as if its walls had waited for exactly this. By late summer, the house had its own music coffee, grinding at 7 cleats thudding across the mudroom tile, the soft buzz of Lila's camera powering on in the sunroom. We built routines the way you stack plates carefully, always aware of the potential for clatter. School supply lists appeared. Practice schedules multiplied, and I developed a sixth sense for when to start dinner, so the oven door opened at the exact minute Daniel walked in. 3 months after the wedding, the tempo shifted almost imperceptibly at first, like a song slipping half a beat off. It began on a Tuesday evening when Lila announced she was going to a friend's film club screening. I glanced at the clock and said what had become standard in our house home by 10 on a school night. She didn't look up from the message she was typing. "Mom lets me stay till 11. In this house 10, I said, careful with my tone, as if loudness alone could turn a boundary into an argument. Her eyes flicked up, then cool and deliberate. "I'll ask Dad." The word Dad hung between us like a challenge. "It's not a negotiation," I replied, but she was already walking down the hall. That week, Jonah forgot to wheel the recycling to the curb 3 times. When I reminded him, he nodded without looking away from his console. "I'll do it later." "The truck comes before 6 a.m., I said. "It has to be now." He jammed his thumb on the gamepad, paused the screen with theatrical irritation, and banged the bin lid so loudly on the way out that the panes in the back door rattled. When he returned, he resumed his game without a word. Even June, who typically treated rules like a puzzle to solve, began testing the seams. I asked her to clear her markers from the dining table before dinner. She smiled with the practiced sweetness of someone testing a hypothesis. "Dad said I don't have to stop if I'm mid-project." "In this kitchen, everyone stops to eat," I said, stacking plates. "That includes in-progress masterpieces. The incidents didn't explode, they accumulated." Lila ignored my texts when she was out responding to Daniel's in seconds. Jonah claimed he hadn't heard me from 8 feet away. June triangulated any instruction applying for variances by presenting 2 partial permissions as a precedent. One afternoon, I came home early for a conference call and heard Daniel's voice from the kitchen low and coaxing. I rounded the corner unseen when he said, "Just do it when Maya's not around. It's not worth the argument." I stepped backward into the hall as though the air there were different. I made noise with my keys so they'd hear me this time. The conversation stopped. Daniel smiled from the sink, asked about my call, and kissed my temple as if a kiss were a reset button. That night, after the dishwasher hummed and the house exhaled, I told him what I'd heard. "I think we need to be aligned in front of the kids," I said, keeping my voice even. "When you tell them to wait until I'm not here, it erodes everything I'm trying to hold steady." He rubbed the back of his neck, apologetic, but not exactly sorry. "I was trying to keep the peace. Lila wanted friends over this weekend, and you've got that open house. I figured we'd avoid complications." "It doesn't avoid anything," I said. "It teaches them that my no is optional. We can find compromises if we talk first, like after the open house or in the yard or with limits, but not behind each other's backs." He sighed, the sound that means I'm being meticulous. "You're overthinking. They're adjusting. It will smooth out." It didn't. The edges grew sharper, not softer. At dinner, Lila slid her phone toward her lap until her thumbs disappeared beneath the table. "No phones at dinner," I said gently, and she pointed at Daniel without lifting her gaze. He was skimming an email from a partner, the blue light reflected in his glasses. "You're right," I said, looking at him because my words needed somewhere to land. "No phones applies to everyone." He put his away, but not before he shot Lila a small look, a conspirator's wink he probably thought I couldn't see. The next week, I suggested family counseling. I'd spent a night doom-scrolling blended family forums, and the patterns were too familiar, step-parents cast as the disciplinarian biological parents, softening the edges with private exceptions, children exploiting the gap. "We don't need a stranger to tell us how to be a family," Daniel said. "Let it breathe." I tried to breathe. I also tried to hold the line, and the line frayed in my hands. The day of my client appreciation party arrived with a color-coded spreadsheet and a kind of nervous pride. I hosted one every fall, past buyers, current sellers, people I wanted in rooms together, because good conversations tend to end in referrals. The house had never looked better. The rental company built a bar on the patio. Votive candles turned glass warm. The florist tucked eucalyptus into the mantel greens. My business partner, Aisha, arrived early to adjust place cards and talk me through the list of who was worth extra minutes. "The Whitmans are coming," she said, scanning the RSVP. possible relocation from New York, and the Serrano group they're sniffing around Highland Infill. I felt the pleasant rush of potential. Daniel put on a slate blazer and moved through the house the way he did at firm receptions, courteous, funny, and excellent listener. The kids started strong. Jonah took coats with a solemnity that looked good on him. June asked guests if they preferred sparkling, or still the word sparkling pronounced like a spell. Lila offered to shoot candids with her camera, and I watched her frame the light from the hallway into something tender. The first trouble arrived like a bass line bleeding through the ceiling. I was mid-sentence with Mrs. Whitman when the music thumped from upstairs Lila's room. "Excuse me, just a second," I murmured, smiled, and slipped away. She was sprawled on her bed, scrolling speakers loud enough to vibrate the water glass on her nightstand. "Hey," I said over the music. "Can you turn that down? We can hear it downstairs." "I'm just in my room," she said, as if the doorframe were sovereign territory. She turned it down a notch. Theatrical compliance, better. "A little," I said. "Thank you." Back in the kitchen, Aisha raised her eyebrows. "Everything okay?" "Teenage soundtrack," I said, light, and returned to the Whitmans with an apology and 2 fresh glasses of Cabernet. 10 minutes later, the volume swelled again like a tide ignoring a seawall. At the same time, I caught Jonah near the bar, mimicking Mr. Larson, a kind, stooped man in his 70s who speaks slowly because he's careful, not because he can't think quickly. Jonah bent his shoulders and exaggerated each word, while 2 neighborhood teens tried not to laugh. I crossed the room and put a hand on Jonah's arm. "No," I said quietly. "That's not okay. Please stop." "I was just joking," he said, cheeks flushing under the new attention. "He can't hear me. Jokes aren't funny when they make fun of people." "Help your dad at the bar for a while." He slouched away. A few guests had watched. I pretended not to notice. Then came the crash from the patio. A cymbal, a gasp, a child's wail. Outside, June sat on the pavers amidst the delicate shrapnel of 2 shattered wine glasses, crying loudly enough to halt every conversation. "What happened?" I asked, kneeling. "She bumped the table," said Mr. Patel, "a sweet man who once sold me a bungalow at a price no one thought possible." "I think she's okay." Just startled. June's sobs hit a new octave. "I want Dad," she cried. "I want my real mom." The patio air thinned. Every face shifted toward us. Daniel arrived, gathering her into his arms before my explanation could reach his ear. "It's okay, honey," he said. "Accidents happen." He didn't look at me or the glass on the ground. He carried her inside, and I apologized to Mr. Patel and waved the caterer over with a broom and practiced smile I could feel cracking. After that, the evening slid. Lila's music nudged up whenever my conversations mattered. Jonah's sarcasm returned in small, barbed comments within earshot of people I needed to impress. June wedged herself against Daniel's hip and interrupted, tugging his sleeve for water, for a napkin, for nothing. The Whitmans left early, polite as they retreated. Aisha shot me a look across the room that translated, "We'll do damage control tomorrow." By the time the last guest stepped through the foyer, the living room was still and bright and wrong. I closed the door and turned to find my family scattered across the furniture like the aftermath of a storm. Daniel on the couch, with June curled into him. Jonah folded into the armchair, Lila against the wall, arms crossed, phone face down on her thigh like a dare. What was that? I asked the words level, because yelling would have felt like relief, and I didn't want relief. "We talked about tonight. We agreed to be helpful. The kids were kids," Daniel said, exhausted and easy. "They helped at the beginning. They sabotaged an event crucial to my work." I said, each noun placed exactly where it belonged. "Lila, you knew the music was too loud. Jonah, you were rude to my guests." "June, the screaming was unnecessary. You're always complaining," Lila muttered. "This is why we don't want to be around you." Jonah added, almost under his breath, which somehow made it worse. "I beg your pardon," I said. Not because I hadn't heard, but to give Daniel a chance to be the person I married. Lila straightened chin high. "You're not our mother," she said. "You're the woman Dad married. We answer to Mom and Dad." The room went very quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a drop, not before it. June looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, arrogance or fear, or both. Jonah nodded without quite meeting my eyes. I looked at Daniel because there are moments when the next thing said decides the shape of a house. He cleared his throat. Everyone's tired. It's been a long night. That's your response, I asked. They told me to my face that I have no standing in my own home after wrecking a professional evening I planned for months, and your assessment is that they're sleepy. Don't make this into a bigger deal than it is, he said, and the warning in his tone landed like a door closing. I'm calm, I said, measured as a line on a closing statement. I'm asking whether you agree. Do you believe I have no voice here? Of course not. He said quickly, looking past me at the mantel as if there were an answer written there. But you can be controlling. They're adjusting. They're controlling. I repeated just to see how the word felt in my mouth. Setting basic rules is controlling. See, Lila said. Everything is a big deal. Tears pressed behind my eyes, not the hot kind, the heavy kind. I took a deep breath. I need space, I said. Please take the kids to your parents' place or a hotel tonight. You can't kick us out, Daniel said, sitting up. This is our home. It's our home when it's convenient, I said. Right now I need quiet and a room without contempt in it. Pack overnight bags. A long moment followed a silent proof in which the conclusion wrote itself. Daniel studied my face and saw I wasn't bluffing or breaking. Upstairs, he said finally to the kids, grab what you need. Jonah opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. Lila pushed off the wall with a huff that moved the curtain. June slid from Daniel's lap, eyes fixed on the floor. They moved past me on the stairs without brushing my sleeve. We stood in the foyer while they gathered their things. The house felt enormous and small all at once, the ceilings high, the hallways narrow. This is unreasonable, Daniel said at the door, bags in one hand, keys in the other. This is necessary, I said. He paused as if listening for some argument he hadn't tried. When none arrived, he turned, ushered the kids out, and the door closed with a soft, expensive thunk of good wood and new hinges. Silence filled the spaces their noise had occupied. On the dining table were lipstick-smeared glasses and plates of uneaten crostini. On the patio, 2 glittering circles where glass had shattered and been swept away. I stood very still in the middle of the room until the stillness steadied me, then began to gather napkins, stacking what I could into order. I didn't sleep so much as drift surface level, every sound of the house registering as if the walls were breathing with me. Near dawn, I got up, made coffee, and spread a legal pad across the kitchen island. I listed what I'd been holding the mortgage with my name on it, 4 bedrooms worth of heating and cooling, the internet plan upgraded twice to accommodate streaming and homework, the weekly cleaning service I added, because grime breeds resentment faster than anything. Under that, I wrote the quiet work calendars, reconciled permission slips, chased carpools, assembled from 3 schools worth of drop-offs uniforms, resurrected from laundry baskets at 10 p.m., the kind of attention that keeps a life from wobbling. I called someone who would speak plainly. Renee Park and I met 12 years ago at a closing when a seller had forgotten to disclose a sinkhole of an HOA dispute. She's a family law attorney now, unflappable, allergic to euphemism. Talk to me, she said, picking up on the second ring. I told her about the party, the comment at the dinner table, the declaration in the living room, the way Daniel's silence found the shape of agreement. I told her I'd ask them to leave for the night. As property owner, you can change the locks, she said. You don't bar your spouse permanently. You secure the home while you determine next steps. If you change them, provide him keys when you decide on terms for re-entry. Everything you pay for that's in your name, phones, subscriptions, activity fees, you control. You're not depriving minors of shelter or food. You're withdrawing discretionary privileges you fund. That's the legal side. Now ask yourself what boundary you want these changes to communicate. That this is a home with 2 adults whose decisions carry equal weight, I said. That disrespect redraws the map. Then be specific, Renee said. General respect is a slogan. Concrete is enforceable. If you want counseling, say counseling. If you want a united front on rules, define it. If you want consequences tied to behavior, set the scale. When we hung up, I called my financial advisor to confirm which accounts were solely mine. Then I opened my laptop and started closing circles. I logged into the cell plan and removed the kids' upgraded lines I'd added so they could stream on long drives and FaceTime cousins in Oregon. They still had baseline service through Daniel's account. What vanished was the frictionless abundance. I changed passwords on the streaming platforms, deleted user profiles with carefully curated avatars. I emailed Lila's weekend film class and withdrew financial sponsorship for the next term. I messaged the club that ran Jonah's spring training slots. Daniel could register him if he wanted him there. I replied to the debate coordinator about June's tournament fee. Her father will handle registration. None of it felt triumphant. It felt like turning off lights in rooms no one respected enough to switch off themselves. At 1 o'clock, the locksmith arrived, a wiry man named Hector, who carried a tidy canvas bag and worked without small talk until he'd opened the hardware on the front door. "You want them all keyed alike?" he asked. "Backside garage." "Yes," I said. "All the exterior doors." He didn't ask why. When he finished, he set the new keys in a neat line on the counter like punctuation. "If you want a code pad later, I can install," he said. "Gives you flexibility." "Thank you," I said. "This is enough for today." After he left, the house was too quiet. I went room to room and packed what each child would need for 2 nights: jeans, t-shirts, pajamas, toothbrushes, the school binders I found under beds. For Lila, I included the extra battery she always forgot to charge. For Jonah, the shin guards he perpetually misplaced. For June, the notebook of quotes with a ribbon marker holding the page where she'd copied a line about kindness. I set the duffels by the door. I wrote 3 short letters because practicing what you say matters. I told them I cared about them, that I wasn't trying to replace anyone, that respect is a door you open every day. In the late afternoon, my phone lit with texts from Daniel, none of which I answered yet. "Can we come back and talk? The kids want their rooms. You're angry and I get it, but this is extreme. Let's be reasonable." At 6:40, I sent one message. "Pick up the bags at 8. I need to talk to you first." The minutes between felt like the quiet in a courtroom just before the judge enters. I wiped the counters even though they were clean. I put the new keys on a small ceramic dish by the door, and then, not trusting myself, moved them back to the island. At 8:02, the bell rang. Daniel stood with the kids a half step behind him, each face set to its default defense. Lila's expression said, "Don't give me the script." Jonah's said, "Bored is safer than sorry." June's tried to read the room with her chin up. "Why doesn't my key work?" Daniel asked immediately. "I changed the locks," I said even. "Good evening. You changed Maya." He took a breath like someone remembering a training on how to de-escalate. "You can't lock us out of our home." "I haven't locked you out," I said. "I've changed the access until we agree on what home means here. I'd like to talk with you privately." "Anything you have to say you can say in front of my kids," he said, emphasis on my, as if the pronoun were an argument. "They already said plenty," I replied. "This conversation starts with the adults." Silence opened and closed. He glanced back. "Car," he said to them quietly. "Wait for me." Dad Jonah started. Car, Daniel repeated in a tone I recognized from the stories he tells about depositions controlled clipped. They went. Lila last, her glare a final flare. When the door shut, I stepped back and let Daniel in. We stood in the foyer the way people stand in a museum before a painting they disagree about. "I'm not doing this," he said low. "You don't unilaterally reset a family." "Last night it reset itself," I said. "I'm setting terms for whether we assemble it into something livable." "Your terms," he said. "Terms I can live with," I said. I kept my hands folded because gesturing made the words feel like heat. Here they are. We start family counseling. Non-negotiable. We present a united front on household rules. You don't undermine me by offering private exceptions. We agree on baseline respect. No eye-rolling, no ignoring, no triangulating. If someone breaks those, there are consequences that matter. Loss of privileges tied to the behavior. If we can't agree to that, we rethink how we're living under this roof. "You're threatening divorce?" he asked. The word sat heavy and performative between us. "I'm stating that I won't live in a house where I'm treated as extraneous," I said. "That's not a threat. It's a line." He scrubbed a hand across his face, the gesture that means he's buying time to look reasonable. "You changed the locks. You cut off services. You packed bags." "I changed the locks to stop chaos from walking in unannounced," I said. "I cut off services I pay for because privileges don't precede respect. I packed bags so your kids wouldn't scramble. None of this is punishment. It's clarity." He looked past me into the living room at the mantel, where the florist's eucalyptus still made the house smell like a quieter version of last night. "You're serious," he said finally. "I am," I said. "And if I say no to counseling, then the locks stay changed," I said. "And we have separate logistics to work out." He exhaled slowly, a sound like air leaving a tire. "I need to get them settled," he said. "We can talk tomorrow." "You can pick up the bags," I said. "I'll text you times." He nodded once terse. He opened the door, called the kids back, and they filed in to grab the duffels. Lila avoided my eyes, as if eye contact were a concession. Jonah slung his bag over one shoulder and paused like he was going to say something, then didn't. June's hand brushed mine when she took the strap. She looked up, but whatever question formed there didn't make it to her mouth. In the driveway, the car doors shut one by one. The engine turned over, and their tail lights slid across the front windows like a red underline. When the house was still again, I washed the remaining glasses, not because they needed it, but because clean things make sense. I put the notes I'd written to the kids in a drawer I'd labeled later, and then for once didn't label that with a subcategory. I slept, and this time the sleep wasn't deep, but it held. In the morning, I moved through my routines as if I were staging a homebed made with hospital corners. Coffee poured into a mug, heavy enough to warm both hands, a walk through each room to see what light did there. The phone buzzed at 9 with a text from Daniel. "Can we talk at 6? My parents will keep the kids overnight." 6, I answered. The day carried on in practical pieces. I called Aisha to debrief the party. We made a list of who needed immediate follow-up and who would appreciate an apology paired with an invitation to a quieter coffee. "I'll handle the Whitmans," she said. "You handled a crisis without letting the house burn down." "I didn't handle it," I said. I paused it. "Sometimes pause saves the project," Aisha said, and let me hang up first. I cleaned out the sunroom where Lila liked to edit, wiping fingerprints off the glass of the French doors, stacking camera manuals on a shelf. In Jonah's room, I found a sock rolled behind the desk like a small white stone and returned it to the laundry basket purely on reflex. In June's room, I straightened the row of stuffed animals along her pillow and then felt foolish and put them back at angles the way she likes them. I wasn't erasing them from the house. I was restoring the house to a place where they could be included without my body tensing. At 5:30, I set 2 glasses on the coffee table and a pitcher of water, because hospitality isn't a performance, it's what I know. I took the new keys from the ceramic dish and turned them in my hand. When the doorbell rang exactly at 6, I put them down and opened the door. Daniel stood alone. He didn't reach for me. He didn't look past me into the living room. He stood in the threshold the way you do when you remember that thresholds are lines someone drew on purpose. "Come in," I said. He stepped inside. We sat at opposite ends of the couch we used to treat like a punctuation mark exclamation when we celebrated ellipsis, when we drifted into shows past bedtime. Up close, he looked tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. "I talked to my parents," he said, "and the kids." I waited. My mother was direct, he said, a dry twist of a smile that didn't make it to his eyes. "She asked me why I was letting my wife be disrespected in her own house. She said she raised me better than that." I folded my hands in my lap. It was not a vindication I wanted to savor. It was a fact. "I've been carrying a stupid amount of guilt," he said, voice low. "About the divorce. About dragging the kids through court calendars and 2 Christmas trees. I didn't want to be the bad cop again. I thought if I cushioned everything they'd adapt without bruises, so when you held a line, I softened it, and I told myself it was temporary." "It wasn't," I said. "No," he said, "it wasn't." He looked at the water on the table and didn't take any. "I don't like counseling. You know that." "I know that," I said. "But I called a therapist," he continued, "someone my colleague recommended, a Dr. Patel. She has experience with blended families. I booked an intake, if you're willing to go. I let the information locate itself in the room, not grabbing for it." "Okay," I said. "Counseling is one part. I also told the kids that disrespect toward you is disrespect toward me," he said, "that there are house rules and they don't get private loopholes. I told them privileges are earned back by behavior." He looked at me then fully. "I told them I'd failed you." The words didn't feel like a grand gesture. They felt like a door unlocked from his side. "What do you need from me now?" he asked. "Consistency," I said. "In real time." "Not later. When a line gets crossed, I need you standing on it with me. I need decisions about the house made by both of us, not in whispers that begin with, 'Just do it when Maya isn't around.' And I need basic daily respect, please." "Thank you," eye contact names said without a sigh. He nodded, as if committing a list to memory. "Yes." I poured water, and finally he took the glass. We sat there and did the logistics, how keys would be handled today, what to tell the kids about where they were sleeping tonight, which practical tasks needed immediate attention and which could wait. We didn't solve anything all at once because that's not how things actually work. We agreed on the next right step and the boundary around it, and then the next. When he left just after 7, we had a plan for the evening and a time set for the therapist's intake. I walked him to the door and handed him one of the new keys. He looked at it as if it were heavier than before. On the porch he paused, then nodded the smallest bow toward a line he'd decided not to cross again in the dark. When the door closed behind him, the house held steady. I sat on the bottom stair and let the quiet be quiet, not absence. Dr. Patel's office sat on the 3rd floor of a low building near City Park, the kind with ficus trees in the hallway and a view of geese drifting over the lake. The 5 of us took our places in a loose semicircle while she arranged yellow legal pads on a side table as if the angle of paper could matter. She was in her 50s, calm without being placid a way of looking that made even silence feel like a sentence. In this room, she said, we name what's happening without interrupting or litigating. You'll each get time. You can take notes if it helps, but you can't keep score. Lila spoke first, not because she wanted to, but because she hated being last. When Dad started dating, she said picking at a thread on her sleeve, it made everything permanent. The divorce stopped being paperwork. I didn't want to share one more thing. Not the house, not the quiet, not him. Jonah stretched his legs out and pulled them back in. I copied Lila, he admitted. It was easier to be on a side. Also, when I messed up if Maya got mad, it felt like she had standards, and if Dad didn't, then I was fine. June looked at the patterned rug. I liked Maya, she said, small and steady. But if I liked her in front of them, it was complicated. Daniel's voice was even. I didn't back Maya up, he said. I told myself I was protecting the kids. I was protecting comfort. I told the truth. I'd rehearsed that the house had stopped feeling like a home I could exhale in, that my no's were treated like flimsy gates, that being kind had started to feel like handing out coupons no one had earned. Dr. Patel nodded, wrote 3 words on her pad. Alignment boundaries, consequence, and asked us to define them until the definitions were too specific to dodge. She never told us what to do. She translated feelings into something you could actually try at home. By the end of the hour, she said, for next time, each of you choose one action that is yours alone. Not an apology, a behavior. The following days were full of small, deliberate moves that looked ordinary to anyone who hadn't watched us unravel. Daniel texted me before he answered a kid's request, so we could agree on a yes or no in that order. I stopped fixing things no one had asked me to fix. When Jonah tossed his cleats by the door, I stepped over them. When Lila asked for the car on a school night, Daniel said, we'll decide with Maya, and didn't blink when she sighed. I met Lila at a gallery on Santa Fe, where a student exhibit used borrowed light to make storefront glass look like water. We stood in front of a photograph of a diner counter crossed by a single spoon. You can hate me and still talk to me, I said. I can handle hating. I can't handle erasing. I don't hate you, she said, eyes on the spoon. I hate that Dad looks happy, a way Mom doesn't make him look. And then I hate that I notice. I let the words be heavy without setting them down for her. We can coexist with hard noticing, I said. Jonah and I ran laps around the track by his school. He took the inside lane and pretended not to pace me. On the 3rd lap, he said Grandpa told me to apologize. You can, I said, breathing even. Or you can start taking the trash out when someone asks the first time. I can do both, he said, and sprinted the straightaway just to show me he could do a hard thing on purpose. June and I repotted succulents in the sunroom, the kind that forgive you for watering on the wrong day. She pressed soil around a jade plant with the seriousness of a surgeon. If we do a contract, she asked, can we put it on the fridge like a menu? We can, I said, and we can let anyone add to it if they bring a reason. At the 2nd session, Dr. Patel watched us argue about curfew like it was a vase worth appraising. She stopped us when the volume rose and had us repeat each other's sentences until we weren't paraphrasing to win. We left with a list of rules written in Lila's block print and June's bubble letters. Weeknight curfew, no phones at dinner, applies to everyone. Ask once, answer once. If you roll your eyes, you owe the person you rolled at an actual sentence. Consequences match the thing, lose what you misused. Weekly check-in Sunday night. Daniel kept his promise out loud. When Lila tried to carve out a private exception on the way to a friend's house, Mom said I could stay to 11. He didn't look at me to see if I'd cave. Maya and I decide together, he said, 10. He drove them back to his parents for another week because space was still useful. We installed a keypad on the back door the next day so we could share access without passing keys like contraband. I restored nothing yet. I wanted privileges to feel like something you built with the same hands that had knocked them down. On a Friday, 2 weeks after the party, we tried a weekend at the house. The air was cold enough to fog the windows when a pot simmered. I put chili on at noon and left spoons in the drawer on purpose, a test of whether people who wanted bowls could find them without asking me where a house they lived in kept its silverware. At 4, Lila leaned against the counter and clicked her camera on and off as if to check whether the light had changed. "Do you want me to make cornbread?" she asked. It came out casual, which made it better than sweet. "Sure," I said and didn't hover while she measured. At 5, I asked Jonah to take out the trash. He stared at the TV for half a beat, and then stood, turned off the game, and carried the bag outside without banging the lid. On the way back in, he wiped his shoes on the mat. He didn't announce any of this, he just did it. The click of the latch sounded like the tiniest applause. At dinner, Daniel put his phone in a drawer before anyone could point to it. When June reached for hers out of habit, he tapped the table once and she pulled her hand back like she touched a hot pan. We ate. We asked. We answered. No one performed politeness like it was community service. When Lila rolled her eyes at Jonah's description of a bicycle kick, I lifted an eyebrow and she smirked at herself and said, "Okay, yes, cool," in a full sentence that acknowledged both the eye roll and the asterisk she'd attached to it. We ended the night with a movie picked by a vote that for once didn't require a runoff. Halfway through, June fell asleep and used my arm for a pillow without checking if it was allowed. I didn't move until the credits. We repeated the weekend once more, and then started the slow part, bringing the week back. I restored the streaming logins the day after a school morning went out the door without a single raised voice. I emailed Lila's instructor and paid for the next session after she met a deadline without anyone reminding her. Jonah got his data bump when he answered "on it" instead of "in a second," and then did it on it. June registered for the debate invitational after she presented a schedule without triple booking. None of these were prizes. They were the scaffolding returning once the structure could hold it. The Sunday meetings became a thing. We used index cards and a kitchen timer. Wins went up first, not as trophies, but as proof that people noticed. We moved through logistics like a crew plotting a route: who needed the car, who needed quiet, who was cooking, who was on dishes. The rules stayed on the fridge because paper in a visible place can be a better memory than a conversation someone only half heard. We kept going to Dr. Patel. Sometimes the work felt like sanding tedious necessary, the only way to make a surface hold paint. Sometimes it felt like nothing at all until we realized a week had passed without someone triangulating a request. There were slips. One Tuesday, Lila disappeared into a room with a friend and a speaker that could have powered a small concert. Daniel got to the door first. "Down," he said, and when the volume dipped only a little, he said, "Down again," and waited there until it was done. Another afternoon, Jonah muttered, "You're not my coach," when I corrected the way he talked to June. He apologized before dinner with a sentence that included my name. June tried the old trick of asking the second parent after the first said no. Daniel sent her back without letting her finish the sentence. Ask once, answer. Once he said not unkind. We celebrated small things because small things knit. Lila screened a short film she'd shot on a borrowed Super 8, cutting together clips from the neighborhood old dog's alleyways, a hand on a doorknob right before it turned. Jonah's team won a game he swore had been cursed by the turf. He dedicated the goal to whoever cleaned my socks at 10 p.m. that time, which made everyone look at me and then look away, because acknowledging labor in public was still new. June won a round at a tournament arguing that public benches should be more comfortable. She brought home a cheap medal and taped it to the fridge, not the contract, as if to say her wins were part of the house and not the rules. Winter settled in. The sunroom turned pale and perfect for working. We added a lamp that made morning feel less like a dare. On a Thursday in January, Daniel's parents came for dinner. His mother brought a lemon tart, and after the plates were cleared, took my hand in both of hers without saying anything. Daniel noticed and said nothing. The moment didn't need narration. We kept the keypad. It stopped being a symbol and became a convenience. On days when the kids were with Natalie, the house was quieter without feeling empty. On the nights they were here, the hall lights burned a little later, and the dishwasher ran heavy and satisfied. Daniel and I argued behind a closed bedroom door when we had to, and came out aligned even if it meant revising a decision in front of the kids. It was strange how little that humiliated anyone once it was a rule we'd agreed to live by. In March, a late storm blew in, wet and heavy. The power flickered twice, and then the house clicked to dark. Jonah whooped. Lila found the emergency candles I kept in a sideboard. June told us which drawer because she'd memorized where everything was after I labeled shelves in a fit of order that summer. We lit the wick stubs down to their metal feet and passed out sweaters. Daniel pulled logs to the hearth and got a reluctant fire going with newspaper and patience. We ate pantry chili warmed in a pot set at the edge of the flame and laughed when June declared it apocalypse chic. After dinner, we cleared the coffee table and played a card game Lila liked because it rewarded attention more than luck. At some point, I realized I hadn't checked a clock in an hour and didn't care. The house pulsed with a collective quiet that wasn't tense. It was just what a house sounds like when you can hear it. The tick of heating pipes, the whisper of a branch against a window, the human noises of people not performing. On the last hand, Jonah laid down a perfect sequence and tried to look casual, failing at it. "Who cleaned your socks at 10 p.m. that time?" I asked deadpan. He groaned. Okay, he said, grinning despite himself. "Thank you, Maya." "Please," June added, because she'd become the unofficial keeper of manners. Lila rolled her eyes, just enough to show she still possessed them, and then said, "Good game to me," and meant it. The lights came back on with a household sigh. No one rushed to their phones. We blew out the candles one by one until the room smelled like wick smoke and lemons from the tart. Daniel stacked the cards and set them on the mantel. He looked at me in a way that felt like the opposite of a secret. We didn't say anything about it. Spring pressed in at the edges of the windows. On a Sunday afternoon, we opened every curtain and let the rooms be bright. Daniel grilled in the backyard in a jacket because the air hadn't caught up with the sun. The kids drifted in and out up and down the back steps, doors opening and closing without slamming. I set plates on the table and watched the reflection of the yard in the glass, three blurs moving like they belonged to the scene and not just the frame. When we finally sat, the conversation jumped without breaking Lila's new assignment. Jonah's away game, June's plan to sew pockets into every dress she owned. Daniel reached for the pitcher, poured water into my glass first, and then his own. Around us, the house held the sound the way good rooms do, making our noise into a shape. No one announced that we were better. No one tried to name what we were doing now. We ate, we cleared, we stacked dishes, the way you do when you expect to be here tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. The keypad light blinking soft green above the back door, the kind of steady you don't notice until it's back. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.